Marwan Bishara is Al Jazeera's senior political analyst. He joins us now live from London. Marwan, as always, good to speak with you. So Benjamin Netanyahu says he's approved plans for the military to seize and take control of Gaza City. But he's also saying that he's ordered immediate negotiations to secure the release of Israeli captives held in Gaza and to end the war under conditions acceptable to Israel. It is so often the case that Netanyahu publicly straddles this rhetorical line. He holds out the prospect of more negotiations while also insisting he'll continue prosecuting this war. I heard you speaking on our air earlier talking about how Israel is dictating all of the terms now when it comes to negotiations. What does that mean, and where do you see things standing overall right now?
Well, let's start by translating Netanyahu into English. What he's saying is that he is not agreeing to the ceasefire proposal that he agreed to earlier that Steve Witkoff proposed, which is a temporary one for 60 days that releases a number of captives in return for a number of prisoners, and so on and so forth. So one, he rejects that. Two, he's basically demanding a surrender when he speaks of on the basis of Israel's conditions and interests. He's talking about Palestinian or Hamas surrender to Israel. Three, there is no contradiction for Netanyahu between saying we're going to continue with diplomacy and we're going to continue with war. It's called negotiations under fire. What he's proposing is that there will be no respite for Gaza or for Hamas. The genocide will continue. The war will be more severe than before. It will be more like October, November 23. We're talking about transferring something like 1 million Palestinians from north to south. We're talking about the same challenges, same problems with hospitals, with kids, with the elderly, with the suffering, with the starvation, and so on and so forth. So we are back to square one. Netanyahu is saying, basically, in English, we are done with negotiations. We are not going to give a single win for Hamas. In the end of the day, we're going to only agree to a deal whereby our captives are released and Hamas is defeated and dislodged from Gaza, and we take control of Gaza, and eventually we will give it to some sort of a civilian administrations under our oversight and control.
Marwan, we know that there have been more demonstrators out on the streets in Israel the past few weeks, especially relatives of captives that are still being held in Gaza. They're demanding the government do more to secure the release of those captives and to enter into a ceasefire. We know also that Netanyahu is under immense pressure from the far right-wing members of his coalition not to end the war or enter into a ceasefire. Do you think that Netanyahu is feeling any amount of pressure from the protesters? Does he care at all that the number of those people out on the streets might be growing, that their voices might be getting louder?
There's no doubt that there is some form of a pressure on the street, whether it is the families of the captives, their supporters. And my guess is more and more Israelis simply don't want to serve again as reservists in Gaza. Because as you know, they've already recalled some 60,000 reservists. My guess is that they will probably recall more than 100,000 if they're going to reoccupy Gaza. So a lot of people just don't want to serve again. They are sick and tired of that war. For him, this is not his base. These are not the people who will vote for him come October 2026. So he doesn't really care for them. He doesn't care what they think. He doesn't care how much pressure they have, because at the end of the day, they are not going to vote for him if he does or if he does not release the captives alive. And so he is working within his ecosystem, his coalition of fascists and fanatics, in order to secure the control of Gaza, the dislodging of Hamas, the defeat of the resistance, and the subjugating of all of Palestine. Because as we speak of genocide 2.0 in Gaza, we are speaking also about codifying, implementing, finalizing the total division and de facto annexation of the West Bank. All of these are part of his plan, and they are and cannot be implemented if he gives Hamas some kind of a 60 days respite and gets engaged in a protracted diplomacy. He is a warmonger, been from the beginning, and have wasted everyone's time talking about diplomacy and deals and the day after and what have you. He was never convinced. And he told President Biden on October 19, 23, that he doesn't want to discuss day after plans. So he's not convinced of any of this humbug of American, European diplomacy about two-state solution, about the day after Gaza, and that will lead to normalization. None of that is of his concern. His concern is more, we're going to reoccupy everything in historic Palestine. We're going to control it. We're going to annex most of it. We're going to try to transfer, ethnically cleanse a good number of people in Gaza, and that will be our end game. By this, he will preserve his coalition of fascists and fanatics and move forward to the next elections.
Marwan, you just mentioned U.S. diplomacy, and a few minutes ago you mentioned U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and the role he's played in all this up until now. I'm curious to get your perspective on where the U.S. is right now when it comes to this process. At one point, not too long ago, the Trump administration was still engaged in trying to reach a ceasefire deal. Does it look to you as though the U.S. has lost interest in all this, or do you think that there will be more involvement again?
You know, this all reminds me of Trump 1.0, right? When they were talking about the deal of the century, and the Palestinians were saying, what are you talking about? This is illegal. This is not fair, not just. We can't accept this. You know, you were proposing something else before. And they said, in a very businessman-like, the deal is no longer on the table. This is passé. Now we're talking about now. Now it's a whole new world. So for the Trump administration, at this point in time, my sense is that they are following in Netanyahu's footsteps. Every time you ask Trump what's next, he said, we will wait for Netanyahu. What he thinks, what he does, what he's going to do. That doesn't mean he has totally green light to do all he wants for as long as he wants. It means that he has the freedom to do what he needs to do in a certain period of time, a reasonable period of time that doesn't embarrass, doesn't humiliate American diplomats moving forward in the Middle East, and certainly doesn't humiliate American allies in the Middle East that have been trying to push Trump in order to get involved in the day after. So for the time being, the Trump administration is standing behind Netanyahu. That doesn't say that Witkoff, as a person, a special envoy, has not tried to get some kind of a deal that's agreeable to Israel, but can also work as a temporary something where we will have some form of a pause in Gaza. But I think perhaps we are beyond that now, except, and I keep saying that because this is very important, without Arab pressure, without Arab leverage, without those who committed trillions of dollars to American treasury, American investments, American sales of arms, and so on and so forth, without that kind of pressure being put on Washington, without main leaders of the Arab world standing behind Qatar and Egypt, even going to Washington, like the Europeans went to Washington, in order to lobby the Trump administration. Anything short of that kind of pressure on the Trump administration, I don't see them moving forward to put pressure on Netanyahu. And hence, it's going to be left for Netanyahu and his fascist and fanatic coalition partners to do as they deem necessary in Gaza, unfortunately.
All right, that's Al Jazeera senior political analyst Marwan Bishara. Marwan, thanks so much. Great to get your perspective.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.